So let's go ahead and see if we can go ahead and jump in. I think it would be good to stay a little bit on schedule. We do have a reception coming afterwards in which you'll have the opportunity to have further conversations, not just about life science, but certainly about all the different programs that our panelists have under their portfolio at the moment. So jumping into introductions, we have a composition of the entire transatlantic healthcare and life science ecosystem with us. And that's actually a very unique thing to have because at the Texas EU Summit, we're looking at policy and trade. We're looking at geopolitical macro factors, micro factors on the investment side that dictate how we're making decisions and looking at the future. And we're also looking at the actors that have to react to those decisions and actually operationalize medical devices, in vitro diagnostics devices, the things that you rely on but maybe don't think about in your everyday life, or I certainly hope not if you're not one of us industry people. And these things translate very well across borders for those that are in the sector. It's a very powerful and nuanced sector. And this is a really interesting place to have this conversation at this moment because all of the things that you've been hearing in the news, the things that you may be reading about, hit a very complicated situation when it comes to something that requires long-term investment, long-term stability, and long-term predictability. And that's why I think it's very interesting to discuss life science diplomacy in this time for those that are working in an international level, a multinational level, regional levels, and who are operating within the field. So that's why this panel is a very unique composition. Now, sitting immediately to my left, I'd love to introduce Ambassador and Consul General Stefan Lindström. Could you please introduce yourself?
The question is really, what do you want to know? She said that already. 30 years in the business, also involved a lot in venture capital on the private side, including life science and everything else. 9 years in the US in total, all the 9 years in California, now 6 months in Houston, and being now almost dubbed as an honorary Texan because I speak so highly about Texas as a business opportunity everywhere. Maybe leave it at that at the moment and a lot of more provocative comments later.
So one of the reasons why I'm so excited to have Stefan here with us is we just opened up the consulate in Houston, Finland. And this is excellent because, Finland has a whole lot that's going on right now, but the relationship with Finland and Houston is also a reflection of every other conversation that we've had here today with aerospace and defense, marine technology, energy technology, radio, all of these things that are happening that you see around the ecosystem are happening there in Finland. And of course, Houston is the perfect partner for that. So he has a great purview on everything that's happening there. Now, sorry?
Oh, I'm just going to add on, of course, that with the words that Elizabeth said, that we have a motto at the consulate saying that Houston, we have a solution, and the solution is Finland.
Happiest country on earth, so I'm sure we're going to hear more about some of those solutions. And to his left, we're lucky to have Mass. Now, Mass is an incredible entrepreneur who's been through multiple sides of this ecosystem, very complicated and very skilled at navigating those complications in healthcare and life science. Now, Mass, please do not pelt him with questions, but he comes from this wonderful country you may have heard of in the news lately called Denmark. So coming back to how are we handling our transatlantic relationship from a Danish-American perspective, I would love an introduction from you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, your question is not an easy answer, but anyways, it seldom is, right? So I've been within the life science industry since 2002, when I graduated from University of Copenhagen with a PharmD degree. I've been working in Denmark, I've been in the pharmaceutical industry, and then in Switzerland in the medical device industry, and now here in the US. It's been in the US for the last 4 years, actually here in Austin. And when people ask me, actually Austin reminds me a little bit of Copenhagen. So you can take that as a compliment to Austin, actually. It's very interesting here. So I'm right now I'm leading a startup within a bigger corporation where we are actually looking into, the challenges we have cross-border from North America, US into the European market and all the different there in culture and regulations and whatnot, but we'll get into that. So that's the experience I bring. And of course, my opinion.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to more of that opinion based on your experience. And to Mass's left, we have Elizabeth, who comes to us from representing one of these states known for biotech and investment from Germany. Could you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Elizabeth. From one Elizabeth to the other. Please don't mix us up.
I would take it as a compliment. Feel free to mix us up.
No, I take it as a compliment. Thank you for having me on the panel, and good afternoon, everyone. I am the business representative for a German federal state called Rheinland-Palatinate. Even better in German, we say Rheinland-Pfalz. And before I introduce myself, to get over the afternoon slump, I want to see by show of hands who has ever heard of Rheinland-Palatinate. Okay, leave your hands up. No. Please leave your hands up. I want the next group of people who have ever had a Riesling from Germany, ever drank a Riesling from Germany. Please put your hands up. You have had, congratulations, a product from Rheinland-Palatinate. Leave your hands up. I will get the rest of you too. Whoever hasn't had their hands up, have you ever had Haribo, gummies? I'm sure you do. And the rest of them, if you don't drink wine, you've had Bitburger, or you are having a sandal called Birkenstock. Those are all products from Rheinland-Palatinate. Congratulations, you know us. So we are located in the southwest of Germany. We're bordering France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. So kind of, we like to say we're in the heart of Europe, and 20 minutes away from Frankfurt International Airport, bordering the Rhine Valley. So basically, we're super accessible in the heart of Europe. And yes, and we're very known for a lot of things, as I just showed to you. But yes, biotech is one of our focus industries. And we made recently, I want to say in the last couple of years, especially media news, because we are the home of BioNTech with the very first COVID vaccine.
You know, I really do love the tourism campaign where they specialize in fine wines and gummy bears and then come up with biotech to follow that up. I wonder if there's a coincidence in healthcare. So it's wonderful to have these conversations at this particular moment, particularly following some of the dialogues that we've been lucky enough to have here today. I'm Elizabeth Jennings, and I've been working across the Atlantic for the last 15 years. I spent about 10 years of my life living outside of the US and South America, Canada, which is a proper other country, particularly if you ask them these days, and across Europe. And I've had a lot of conversations around specifically what's happening. I'm very fortunate to have privileged conversations. I work in 28 different countries right now, and those privileged conversations happen over WhatsApp at 3 a.m. when something's happened and I was asleep. And I get the message of what's going on now? And the real question is, separating the signal from noise. Does this actually impact us? Is this something that is significant? Is this a blip on the radar? And then most importantly, where do we go from here? What do we do about this? Do we need to calculate tariffs? Is this real? Is this meaningful? Do we need to think differently about the uncertainty and predictability that we have relied on in long-term decisions? In healthcare and life science, it reflects everything else, either before other sectors or reacting to them in geopolitics and in macroeconomics, because it becomes related to how the people actually move and think, how systems actually move and think. So it's a very good canary in the coal mine to me to think about what is happening and where we go from here. Now, last year I had the honor of speaking at a conference in France about this. And I wanted to really rally all the Europeans together. So I said, here's what Draghi mistook. The Draghi report said, we're going to really bring a lot of Europe together, and we're going to make it this healthcare and life science powerhouse. Now, what I didn't know was coming after December was January with Greenland. And it has been a long decade this year. And thinking about how are we going to rely on our partners, our supply chains, and all these things happening. Now, what Draghi missed from my perspective was the internal changes in the US, our soft funding landscape, our non-dilutive funding landscape, whether or not we're bringing in new pilot programs, grant programs, how we adopt new innovation, test it in the US. That funding has diminished, shifted, or been put on hold in different capacities with different international requirements around governance. I'm also on the early stage investment side, and so this becomes very important because we had taxpayer money for things, and oh no, now I have to look in my pockets. And that becomes kind of troublesome when we're looking at multi-million-dollar 7-11-year investments for things that we want to rely on. And this is the backdrop in which we are looking across the Atlantic because there are emerging opportunities and programs for American institutions to do R&D in stable environments in the Baltics, in the Nordics, across DACH. We have different investment opportunities from the US to diversify our portfolio and ways, as Dr. Moser mentioned, to have a common goal around how do we further these bridges. So the two things that I will leave you in context before we jump straight into our conversation are this. We have a Life Science Diplomacy Alliance because these things are changing, and as people in industry and economy right now, we all have a stronger opportunity to act as diplomats in science diplomacy than I think we did before, because this landscape and these relationships across the Atlantic deeply intertwined, not separable, but changing. And this is very useful for us to become better actors in our own capacities. We're going to explore this in just a minute. And actually, let's just go ahead and get into that. So, Stefan, I'd be very curious if you could share with us some of your thoughts about what is working well right now. What is moving across borders? What do you see in these shifts that really is resilient at the moment as we try to separate that signal from noise?
Well, the first thing what we have to understand is that everything relates to geopolitics and resilience. And then I think the head of MI6, Ken McCulloch, said about a year ago, he said that you might not be interested in geopolitics, but geopolitics is interested in you. And this is something that is really a key observation in many ways, that the geopolitical forces, they determine where companies can operate, where they can sell, where they can do research, what are the value chains and how do they operate, irrespective if we are talking about steel, if we are talking about aluminium, if we are talking about medtech, if we are talking about anything. It's really geopolitics that is the key to everything. Then we add on those things, we had the trade policy, we had sanctions, industrial subsidies, export controls, and all this, the sovereignty in different ways. We talk about data sovereignty, and this all creates then what the international trade is today. And let's complicate things a little bit further. I mean, the international market has been working really well since the sort of, should we call it mid-90s, when globalization came in and changed all the value chains all over the world, and also as a positive effect brought 1.5 billion people from poverty to the lower middle class, to the middle class. And now all that has been working so well for such a long time is being disrupted for various reasons. And when trade works in the best way, there is three things that are so important. It's stability, political stability, economic stability. It's consistency, you know what's happening, where we are going, and it's predictability, that we can anticipate of what decisions come in there. In today's world, we have none. And we really don't know where we are going. So making these decisions as a, should we call it a procurement specialist, must be really, really difficult. So what is working? One day something might work, another day something else. But what we do have to realize that this is also people business. It's not only states that talk to each other, it's human beings, it's areas, city to city, state to state, in a different way. And last year in May, about a year ago, I took 14 Finnish mining companies to Arizona, and I met the governor, met the Speaker of the House, the mayor, and everybody told me that, Stefan, don't care about what's happening in DC and all the noise coming out from DC. Come and do business with the regions, with the city, with the county, with the people, with the companies. And that's working. The other problem is that we have too many people in the world who are reacting to all the news ideologically and impulsively. And most of the people have never been to Europe or they have never been to the US. on both sides. But it's the people that are working, if I may conclude with that.
I couldn't agree with that more. It's to my earlier point of us having the opportunity to be, lowercase d diplomats, is that we have the responsibility, if we are the only people who someone may encounter from the U.S. or vice versa, to represent good listening skills, which is something that us Americans may struggle with, and to actually make decisions that are proactive in these situations. And I think that is very important. Most of us do not want to debate philosophy, particularly emotional philosophy from news. We want to have conversations around policy, and particularly in industry, Mass, we have the obligation to figure it out. It doesn't matter if we have tariffs now, we have supply chains, we have sanctions that change, the landscape. Industry still has to go figure it out. So could you tell us from your perspective as a leader in operationalizing transnational viewpoints into something that actually hits a balance sheet in a positive way, what's working now and what's currently happening from your perspective?
So I think to your point, the resilience is important, right? And the resilience also comes in just acknowledging there are changing landscapes, Greenland for Denmark, for instance, but it's not, as an industry or as a company, we have to be aware of it, but we also have to operate around it, because next month it's going to be something else. And we always need to be able to kind of move around these obstacles, if you want to call it that. And what we often, well, at least the way I see it, actually some of the regulations we have in place is actually helping us. Often we complain about the regulation. So within medical devices, we have the FDA, we have on the American side, and we have the EU MDR on the European side. But it's actually a very good guideline for us, because it tells us what we need to do to be able to bring something to market, at least how we register it. And that is not influence whether or not Greenland is under siege, because those regulations in place, they might change over time, but they're not changing as fast. So I think what's working well is the regulations. Of course, they are not aligned across the United States and Europe, so it's different what is expected from us. So of course, what is really important here is the collaboration between the one side and the other side, in terms of when you're coming from a medical device point of view, is with the regulatory people you're working with, that they do know that Europe is 20 plus different countries. And yes, EU MDR is one thing, but there's other aspects you need to be aware of course. So it's not as straightforward, but at least we have a guideline. But we need to be aware of it and know how to work it. But I think, and I know it's atypical from a business person to say that actually regulations is pretty good, but it actually is, it's very good, and it guides us, and it ensures that we have safe products out there. I mean, we all at some point probably going to use the healthcare system, and we want to have safe products, and we want to live longer. And that's, of course, then an obligation we as life science has to live up to.
It's interesting. In a startup within a larger corporation, mass cannot move fast and break things, because those things are people. So as a person, I'm always glad that there is regulations, and I'm glad that there are collaborations in early stage R&D. Denmark has great programs. There's a BioBridge programs across Denmark and other countries. In Houston at the Texas Medical Center, that's been going on for multiple years with great success. There's collaborations in Boston and San Diego, San Francisco. So a lot of this does come down to, we have academic TTOs that spin out, and they collaborate with different institutions in Denmark. There's actually quite a lot in that early stage research capacity, translating it to market, that is institutionalized across the Atlantic, that can be very powerful, and then hopefully also affect some of those policies at some point. Now, I'd love to hear from you, Elizabeth, on that note of really what is working well, how are things moving, not just in the wine and gummy bear space, but also, that's such a hard sales pitch. I hope that's on her business cards. Everyone will remember her state now. But could you tell us a little bit more about what you're currently seeing?
Yes, for sure. But even just go buy more gummy bears, please. No, seriously. I mean, hearing about the question in the first place, I thought maybe even to start with, what are the differences between the US and the European, and in this case, I speak about the German life science market. So in very brief terms, the situation as is that Germany, for example, has its advantages. For example, has lower operating costs, higher life quality. For example, for U.S. companies that want to set up shop in Germany, they're very happy for their employees to be there. And then we also have a very strong academic base. Vice versa, US has a higher investment capital. There's for sure no argumentation about that. It's faster commercialization, so bringing products to market, and then also higher funding rounds. This being said, for Germany, for companies in Germany, biotech, life sciences companies in Germany, they want to come to US. That remains so. US is an incredibly attractive market, and companies want to come here, they want to partner here, and they want to scale here. But, and I mean, I don't want to repeat too much about what already was said, exactly, the geopolitical situation is a very big point that I hear on a day-to-day basis, that just there's uncertainties, tariffs, supply chain disruptions, tensions on either side, and that does cause delays. But I do want to say that I personally think for the giants of these worlds, the really big companies, they've made their long-term plans. So they will come no matter what. And they have their partnerships in place and, their plans for setting up a manufacturing site. So what, maybe there's some delays, but I think it's very important to stress that it's the SMEs and the startups that get caught in the middle of all this. Germany is a country, its backbone, its economic backbone is SMEs. We have very big companies, obviously, we have small companies, but a German economy is made of SMEs. And those are the ones that kind of get lost because they might be thinking of expanding and coming to the US, and then with all the tensions going on, it's like they might delay, they might not come. So there's just a lot of uncertainty, and that's what I see in my day-to-day work too.
That's very interesting because it reflects well what I'm seeing as well. There's 27 EU states, and now we are talking about the 28th regime, which would create one entity for EU-based companies to operate more seamlessly across borders. And this is not entirely in response to the geopolitical situation at the moment, but certainly correlated in creating multiple entities. There's Choose Europe as a program, there's Scale Europe as a program to make the ability for European companies to go from Germany into France, into Finland more seamlessly, because at the moment one of the key challenges, as Elizabeth alluded to, is not just entering a market and seeing if the economics work out well for that company in healthcare or any other industry, but the actual bureaucracy and regulations that go along with that. It's not just that there's the FDA and it works for 50 different states, and there's the MDR and it works for 27 different countries. Tragically, there's a lot more nuance than different wine preferences and whether or not we're mad about what the Italians have told the Finns to stop doing with pasta. I'm so sorry, Stefan, to put you on the stage there. Ketchup on pasta, it'll cause a lot of problems. So when you start looking at how these opportunities look across the Atlantic, there are now policies saying, hey, let's work better together. Let's move more money cross borders. Let's help these companies scale within Europe as an alternative in parallel to looking at the US. We've seen always an attractiveness in the US market. I think that's probably one of the reasons why Mass is here. One of the reasons Stefan's here is Mass with his own company and Stefan guiding other economic opportunities on the basis of Finnish interests, is that the US has had a tremendous capital market, a tremendous large single market to operate in, whereas Europe has had incredible research institutes, a huge non-dilutive grant funding. It's almost the inverse of 80-20 as you would consider. So the companies entering the US have had incredible power with low technical risk, low clinical risk, and higher commercial risk to adapt their models to the US market. Now you throw in geopolitical uncertainty, and this starts to change because if we no longer have that capital market that is investing at the same rate, now we have something very interesting. So do we stay in Europe? Do we come to the US? How are we looking at some of these policy failures when we are perhaps indecisive as a union across the Atlantic. Stefan, could you tell us from your perspective where some of these failures or gaps might be happening in policy and in the larger leadership in helping to guide the economic decisions of these companies?
Well, the first thing is that in the US there is an internal market with one single language, with one single legislation. In Europe we have something which is so-called internal market, with 27 different languages and 27 different legislations still in the implementation, particularly if you're talking about directives that has to be implemented by each country separately. You mentioned the Draghi report, and I would say it this way, that Europe is in crisis in many ways right now, not purely because of the geopolitical situation. It's a self-inflicted crisis. Let's not waste a good crisis. Let's utilize it to actually make things work the way it's supposed to be working in so many different ways. Let's consolidate in different things. The last years I've been working as the Finnish tech ambassador with a global mandate, and I've been working a lot on the telecom side. And when you take telecom as an example, in a way that in the US we have 3 operators and they have approximately 100 million customers each. In India, 3 operators, approximately 300 million customers each. In China, 3 operators, approximately 300 million customers each. In Europe, we have 161 operators with approximately 3.1 million customers as an average. How can we compete on a global level with the technological investments that we have to make ourselves competitive in this? So the old maxim that we have that US innovates, China replicates, and EU regulates, it's absolutely true in many ways. And you can't regulate yourself into power unless you have a monopoly in the market, and we don't. And it's the same thing that what Mads was saying about that EU protects, the US enables, and China controls, when you look at it from a sort of citizen perspective. And we need to get rid of that one. And I think I cite my good friend Jeffrey Blair, who works for the Greater Houston Partnership, where he said that we regulate enough to keep everybody safe, but we also enable business to operate. And that's where we should come in Europe. I have been working for the European Commission myself. I was 2.5 years working as a legal officer, writing a directive or directives, and see it from the inside. They are very, very competent people, but there's also the old maxim that the European Union is like a bicycle. You need to bike the whole time to keep it upright. And at some point, we have now enabled enough legislation to keep ourselves upright for the next 20 years. We don't need to find more. And we have so many examples in Europe right now where we are creating legislation that it's actually of no practical use. My good friend Pekka Lundmark, who was the CEO of Nokia for 10 years, recently now resigned. And he said that Nokia hired, I think it was 2021, 350 new people in Finland, and 150 of those were compliance officers. What is the added value of a compliance officer for a multinational company? Not much. I mean, what's below the line? And we need to look at these things, that what is really of practical use of all the regulations and directives that we have brought into force. Yes, it's good to be safe. We want to have a safe environment, but there's a limit to how these things are. Just a practical example from Finland. I read the newspapers this morning, and I was sort of like, oh my God. We all know what composts are, right? So people with a home, there's a mandatory thing that you have to compost your waste. And now we have created positions where people from the government, from the municipalities, go and control these composts. Seriously. Is this something that actually brings added value to the whole thing? Yes. We think that this is a good idea, that people should have a compost, but do we really need to create a kind of a mandatory legislation to do these kind of things, so that we have a controlling mechanism that you get there that, Keith, you haven't composted right, you get a €27 fine. what is the use for the society, what is the use for the individuals. It doesn't work like that. So there's a lot that we need to look ourselves in the mirror and see what can we do in a different way so that we get the economical wheels to go on. Let's not waste a good crisis. And well, I can come back a little bit of what we are doing now on the sort of resilience side and the defense side, because it's everything connects to each other. But as you may realize, this is a little bit of a passion for me, and I tend to go a little bit overboard. Thank you.
This is actually really interesting. So out of curiosity, since you were so good at raising your hands about wine and gummy bears, how many of you know where Nokia came from? I can see you, so okay. Awesome. So the story of Nokia is actually really interesting, and since we're totally over time and all going to hang around for the reception anyways, Nokia comes from this little town called Oulu in the very north of Finland. There are reindeer, but you stop before any of them have a red nose. And this is fascinating because all the early cell phone technology that we all enjoy now was invented in Finland because there was no interference up there. So they have been tremendous pioneers in cell phone, radio signal technology, and all of that in telecom. And to this day, if you get on Finnair from DFW to Helsinki, half that plane will be Nokia employees. It's been tremendous in transatlantic trade. So, thinking about how things have been changing, by the way, I'm not paid by Nokia as a spokesperson, but thinking about how things are changing on that commercial side. Mads, can you tell us from your perspective, you've been in healthcare and life science your entire career, in Denmark, in the US, certainly different perspectives around risk. As Stefan mentioned, risk, regulatory, but also just different perspectives in how we do business. Do we take policy for granted? Do we expect government to step in different ways? Do we as commercial leaders make those decisions ourselves and accept the repercussions? How do you see that sort of relationship that he mentioned changing, particularly now that you're here on the US side?
So I think, first of all, I agree with you on the regulations in Europe, and it can be very cumbersome. I mean, personally, it's one of the things I really enjoy about living in the US. It's there's less regulations around me, to be honest. And if I want to put a Christmas tree in my pickup truck and drive around with that, by all means, do it.
And by the way, his pickup truck would not fit anywhere in Copenhagen.
No,
it is the size of one canal.
But in Denmark or in Switzerland, I would be pulled over immediately and get a fine because I cannot drive around with a Christmas tree in a pickup truck. That's just period, right? So I think it's very relevant. And yeah, both from a Danish perspective, also I've been responsible for the entire European Union in terms of commercializing products, and it is 27 different countries, 27 different reimbursement systems, 27 different ways of thinking of, from my point of view, is about healthcare and what is important for the healthcare system. Versus the US, and that's one of the things I'm also advising Danish medical device companies want to come to the US. You need to understand the culture you are going into, and the US is not one country. Figure out where you want to start, and of course, living in Texas, I think Texas is a great place to start if you're a medical device company, because of the investments and the collaboration between the healthcare institutions and the medical device companies. So in Texas, there's a good tradition of collaborating, which is important. If you want to get into a country or a state, you need to collaborate also with the healthcare system and the hospitals. And for US companies going into Europe, you need to treat it the same way. Figure out where do I want to go to Germany, where the healthcare system, in terms of the business, the tenders there, can be quite. They're trying to drive price really, really far down because it's expensive to have a socialistic healthcare system like Germany, Denmark, and the European countries. So the mentality there is, how can we get the best possible technology for the best or lowest price, right? And you need to understand that and be able to then to position yourself and have the right data available. And that is not always clear. When you look and read the regulations, it's not clear to you what is actually expected. So you need to experience that. You need to go there and live it. So I think that's the way I see it. I don't know if that answered your question, but it was just based on your your comment.
It's very interesting because, to your point, one of the things that I think is most surprising for Americans looking at, the plethora of European markets that are available, especially in something like healthcare and life science, is in the U.S. healthcare is a business,
Yeah.
and you the patients, you are the business. In many of these European markets, they're looking to do cost savings for the same quality. They're looking at staffing shortages, many of the same problems that we have in the U.S. I always say may wear a hat, may wear a coat, but you'll see this challenge again. Different language expresses it, different care models express it, different health economic models express it, but the relationships and the values between them vary greatly. So there's a lot of price caps that you can't just exploit everything infinitely because someone has a rare disease, for instance. The inverse of that then becomes also true. If you can't charge $1.2 million for a rare cancer therapeutic, you may not invest $10 million per month trying to run it in a CRO. So we have these very good relationships historically between our regions because we've had the capital market in the U.S. to offset something that may be not financially substantiated in a German market or a Swiss market alone. And that can be a very interesting commercial thing to be disrupted. So looking back to the wine and gummy bear region, I'm renaming this. It's great propaganda.
I deserve it.
No, and I mean, there's nothing to underestimate about the gummy bear market, but there's also some very interesting things that are happening in Rhineland-Palatinate that I think are interesting for our community here in Austin. When you've had these conversations, Elizabeth, with different organizations, you're looking at opportunities that exist in Germany. You're also looking at opportunities for your German portfolio of companies here in Austin. You mentioned earlier, there's some geopolitical hesitation. They read something in the news that may be, a little hesitation-giving. What do you think the current status is with that, and how are you helping to lead that relationship?
Before I answer that, I have to say I had to laugh so hard when you were talking about the compost. If you've ever been to Germany or Europe, but Germany, you move here, you come from like 5 trash cans in your kitchen alone to one, where they just throw everything together, one fall, basically. And, it's so true about what you both said about regulations and, moving here, you're just like, oh my God, I can just do whatever I want, drive around and, that's literally the case.
Yogurt containers.
Yeah, exactly. And but it also is, and then we laugh about it, but it's also the case in terms of attracting business here. That's why Texas is. That's just a fact. It is so successful in attracting business because they're just opening doors, and that's something that German companies value a lot. Every company will value a lot. But that's why there's a very high interest, as I said. I do think from the policy standpoint, from I work for I work with a German ministry, Minister of Economic Affairs, and so obviously this is local state government, and what we hear, those hesitations you were just which I had mentioned before. Obviously, there's a lot going around in the media right now, and if you're a smaller company, you don't know what to believe. That's the fact. If you don't already have an existing partnership, or you might have some first clients, and we've had that case that we have some growing startups that were looking at first clients here, and then those clients basically halted the projects because they were like, yeah, let's wait and see because how things are evolving. So I don't know if that's the truth or not, but that's what I've been told. So we, as a business representative, I work with all different industries, so life science is just one of them. But I try to support them, make those alliances that are necessary for them to make it here, to be successful. Because, and I want to go back to what you said earlier, we are all human beings, and that's been the experience, that literally everyone who comes here and you make those connections, there is interest, especially, I do have to say, I apologize again, people love Germans here, you know, obviously with the German heritage in Texas, it's something where people instantly connect with you, and they connect with German companies. Obviously, Germany is known for a lot of very good qualities, and so that's something where I try to make those connections happen for them. So companies that come to me through the ministry, I try to introduce them to partnerships, alliances, potential customers, clients, that sort of thing. So that's the support I can give, and I do handle mostly, you know, SMEs and startups, because the really big ones, let's face it, they don't need me. You know, the BSFs of this world, they, you know, they have their plans, yeah, so that's the support I try to give, and I'm always very thankful to make connections. So please find me afterwards if you want to connect with me, because I can connect you to the companies that come through me.
One of the things that I really enjoyed about Dr. Moser's conversation is that anytime someone with a PhD who professionally studies something tells me to be optimistic and everything's going to be okay, I'm like, oh, thank goodness. Because that's the sort of information I think that it's very reassuring to have in the backdrop of there's reasons to be optimistic. And again, going back to that noise versus signal part, when we have people like Elizabeth who are like, yeah, we still have these programs, one of the things that I love about specifically her region in Germany is there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of funding for cancer research. When I think about the European tableau at the moment, if you are in, you know, oncology, if you are in women's health, if you're in cardiology, Germany has done immense programming to help bring companies there, you know, from across the Atlantic and from across Europe. And this means this is multiple years of commitment to thinking about, you know, how do we have these long-term, highly scientific collaborations. Is that something you're speaking with companies about?
Yes, and I actually would like to add onto this. So Germany is very, very good in early stage non-dilutive soft, you know, program funding, and that's something we're very proud of. So we have very good ideas, and we bring them to fruition. So one of the things, because you earlier were asking, like, also like what are the problems also maybe, is mid-stage funding, the so-called valley of death, by the way, not only in life sciences, I'm sure. And we're very good in like getting them off the ground, but I think there's really a problem in most countries to really fund that key gap between early success and real scaling. And that's something where, you know, working for a ministry, we try to support where we can with the limited, you know, resources that you have, if you're like a public institution. But for example, we try to do operational support also, not only strategic support. So for example, our state capital Mainz is, we have a life science campus, and we were just ranked among the among the top 10 life science campuses worldwide. We have 12-hectare purpose-built campus with 19,000 square meters of lab ready for companies. That's something that we can do. We try to foresee before, you know, things are like urgent, and then you need the space. And I think that's where very often it lacks. You know, it kind of like you just kind of go with the flow, and then all of a sudden things are needed and they're not in place.
Now, we're not going to talk about the German notary system because I really want everyone to go to Germany and take advantage of this lab space, but I am glad it's painful. It's terrible. You've never seen anything like it. But it's very accurate, and that there is operational support to help with that sort of thing. It's blinding to the American perspective. Now, speaking of blinding to the American perspective, we put in the title here resilience, because I do think there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic, and many of those reasons are that we are sitting in this room right here today. Now, of course, there should be hundreds more of us, but we are all people who are looking at different opportunities within our own domains, and they may or may not really intersect with life science or investment or these sort of thinking, but there's a lot of power behind how we look at decisions right now when we have uncertainty. I'd love to hear from you, Mass, what you are thinking about when it comes to resilience at the moment. What lasts? Because we have, I think, opportunities for precedented events, but perhaps not in our lifetime, where maybe we could have major geopolitical shifts, we could have major economic shifts. You're looking at that as a leader who has, financial responsibility for your organization. Where's the resilience right now that you're seeing?
So to my experience, and we learned a lot through also COVID. I mean, COVID was the first, I don't know if we want to call it a real big test, but it turned a lot of things upside down, and we really had to innovate to try and figure out how to meet, how do we provide healthcare in a system where basically nobody wants to go out and is afraid of everything is happening around. But I think what we learn is there is a resilience in the system, and we are still operating as a company, right? We have systems in place to ensure that everybody, inside of the company, we know who is responsible for what and where to go. And then I think what is important is the transparency, that we need to show transparency internally and externally. If we have issues, if we see challenges, we need to discuss it. It cannot be solved in a vacuum. It needs to be solved as a collaboration. And that openness is important to have that. And that necessarily was not the case prior to COVID, at least not in the medical device companies I worked in. It was more departmentalized than anything. Now we really see that we can't solve it in a vacuum, not as a company and not as a society. So I think I see resilience, and if you think about all the things we've been through the last 5 years and we're still around, I mean, I think that is a proof of resilience, that we accept the realities as they are, we talk about them, and we try to figure out how do we then act accordingly to those realities. Because it's happening, and we can't, it's what it is, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing, is that there's a coupling between resiliency and accountability, but also just that calm-minded, okay, so now we're in this situation, what are we going to do about it, and how do we objectively build policies so that we can continue if, different events continue to happen in this way. What do you think about that, Stefan?
Just wanted to build a little bit on what you said about resilience, because in today's world, national security is increasingly digital security. And if we don't have the digital security, we basically have nothing. Sometimes I've developed a flow chain in one way, or how it works, that, the digital networks backbone, the digital networks form the backbone of the whole society, regardless of how it works. Cities, municipalities, hospitals, the whole value chain is operated on digital networks. And all these applications need AI. AI need computing power. Cloud provides the power. Edge brings it closer. And everything is depending on networks. And if we lose the networks, we lose the control of everything. And it's not only that, it's also, I'm just using Ukraine as an example, because when Russia attacked Ukraine, one of the first things what they tried to do is to destroy all the healthcare data of Ukraine. Why? Because if you don't have any healthcare data, you don't have an identity, and then it's easier to take over the Russian identity as a Ukrainian. It was actually Google and Microsoft who saved everything, putting it up in a cloud in 2 days. But we talk about then data sovereignty, we talk about infra sovereignty, technological sovereignty, cyber sovereignty, regulatory sovereignty, and so forth. So the resilience is really the overarching thing, but everything is driven by how do we protect those networks so that the society works. And that's the kind of the big thing that we need to keep in mind, and we need to protect those things so that we have control over those. We cannot do everything on our own. I mean, there's also a lot of discussions on many things now, that every country should have their own cloud and things like this. I mean, I would say that it's even childish to talk about these things, because it's at least 10 years before we are able to do that. We are now dependent on the big 5 or big 10, whatever it is. Of course, we want to have that one. In Finland, we had an example that our election system was on Amazon Cloud. And now we're actually moving it into a sovereign cloud. And piggyback again on the healthcare data. So we also, all the Finnish healthcare data is in one of the multinationals' cloud. But having said that, we also have a digital twin. We cannot have everything in one cloud. We have to have it in a different cloud. So that we have actually 3 at the moment, what I'm aware of. We have 1 in Finland, we have 1 on a multinational, and we have 1 in Europe. So whatever happens, there's always a backup of everything. And this is the way we have to look into these things in today's world, long term. And realizing that, the rules have changed in a way, and there's no way that we are going back anywhere. And we just need to understand this one and work according to those rules.
I think that point around redundancy is very important because that allows you optionality if something else is compromised. And I think that also means that you also change the balance of leverage if, for instance, I'm very glad to hear, Microsoft came to help alleviate some of the stress on Ukraine. There's many different cases of that, but if Microsoft had not been there, that would have been very much a problem. I'm very lucky I have an office in Tallinn, so I spend a lot of time in Estonia. I get on a prop plane. Sometimes it makes a U-turn because airspace is closed over Tartu. Sometimes you get on a boat, and that one usually works out pretty well. We had at 5 o'clock this morning, 2 drones came into Estonia, and a digital alert system went off in everyone's phone that said, I'm paraphrasing here, hey, everyone, go inside, duck, don't. By the way, this isn't a drill. And naturally, this has happened multiple times, but it is very worrisome. And everyone has full maps of everything. Everyone knows what is happening. It's 1.3 million people. And tragically, Estonia is no stranger to having to have these sort of resiliency programs. But the interesting part, we're bringing a delegation of about 250 people across the US and Europe to Estonia in 3 months. And we're looking at different investments, these long-term partnerships. How you have these conversations around, by the way, no, everything's going to be okay when you have notifications going off on your phone. Well, one of the interesting parts to this is governments like Estonia's are fully digital. So if all the buildings were razed to the ground, the government could continue to function. All of the financial systems, all of the processes, all of the records as a very digital first nation. And it's very similar in places like Finland, where instead of just saying we're going to fax everything over and hope the file case stays where it is, there's a lot of those sort of forward-thinking policies that, personally from the American side, I think we could benefit a lot from. And in kind of taking that first, and by the way, the drones were Ukrainian and everything's probably going to be okay. But that's another story. So, thinking about that in the forward-looking perspective of where do we have accountability, where do we build in resilience techniques, where do we build in optionality in thinking about our planning, anything that you could have in the next 3 years, Elizabeth, that would be the most beautiful thing that you think we need in the future for life science diplomacy from your perspective, what would that thing be? Magic wish.
Magic wish. So I'm an avid traveler. I wish there would be a biotech passport. Maybe we can start with EU biotech passport, but then maybe a global one, basically where once you get the stamp of approval, your visa stamp or whatever you want to call it, you're approved to go wherever you want. You're approved for funding. You're approved to scale up, have partnerships. That would be a magic wish list for me.
Okay, so more seamless bureaucracy. Perfect. Mass, what would be your wish for the next 3 years? Best possible outcome. What would you wish for?
That Elizabeth's wish comes true.
It's a good one, yeah.
No, but it is, when we're looking at, from our perspective, and you look at the FDA and EU MDR, I mean, there are big differences, and it would be nice that we could have a better collaboration, so you don't have to redo everything as we often do. It's a lot of investment, and it's also a lot of time that's being spent to redo something that has already been approved in one way or the other, right? Because the FDA and EU MDR wants the same, which is safe products and so forth, but they want it in different ways. So I would wish that they could aligned that a bit more. So we had a more seamless. It also brings products faster to the market, to be honest, technologies.
Yeah, and I think we'll get there in about 100 years, just about 100 years. Yeah. No, perfect. So what would you wish could be made to happen, despite all the bureaucratic difficulties, despite human nature? Stefan, what would be the one thing you think would be the most powerful within the next 3 years to exist?
In the medtech space. So that's really what Mats was saying, and I think it's just a waste of time for everybody that if it's approved in a Western democracy, like in the EU or in the US, why shouldn't it be approved on the other side of the pond? I was heavily involved in the negotiations where we talked about TPP and these other things, and I was really all about unifying the different regulations. It's kind of stupid. Okay, so medtech is one thing, car industry is another one. Why is not a European safety standard approved in the US and vice versa? It's costing the car industry billions of dollars every year to operate on these things. So get these people to talk to each other and create that kind of a thing instead of trying desperately to protect your little piece of industry that you have on those and get them going. Because the competition is soon not that the Europeans are competing with the Americans and the Americans competing with the Europeans. We are competing against India and China. And they don't have these regulations necessary. And they don't follow these safety standards as we do. So we need to get our act together to look at it from a sort of global perspective instead of anything else.
I couldn't agree more. You know, we're also collectively racing against disease. We have a saying, of course, you know, the patient is waiting. And at the end of the day, that's really what matters. But I would like to caveat, I mean, think of the lawyers. You put all the lawyers out of business if we just agreed.
Well, the AI is putting lawyers out of business anyway. So that's not a big issue. So where do we go from there?
Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful note, I think, to leave on. So do we have any questions? We're putting lawyers out of business, we're ending bureaucracy, and we're bringing more gummy bears and wine to Texas. I think there's a lot of cases for optimism there, but I think we have just a couple of minutes for a few questions for our esteemed panel.
Hi, I could ask a question. I came in from San Antonio today. I believe most of the panel's based in Houston, if I'm not wrong. San Antonio has a significant interest in defense medical technology and biotechnology in general. I'm just wondering what your experiences are from the Finnish, Danish, and German perspectives, each of you, on San Antonio as a US market entry interest for companies from your respective countries in that space.
You're not as cool as Austin. Sorry, you weren't asking.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. That's a very good question. Maybe let me start by saying that actually Rhineland-Palatinate is the home of Ramstein base that I'm sure everyone knows, especially these days. Earlier they were talking about, you know, airspace, flyover, and that's really big discussion right now in Germany. But this being said, with Ramstein and having such a big US base in our state, obviously this is a very, very prominent topic. And as a ministry, actually, we're placing more and more importance on it. This year, I'm actually going to have a delegation going to Washington, D.C. for AUSA and a trade show. And in general, I'm located here in Texas. Yes, I'm in Houston, but you know we're all close in heart, more or less. And I'm very aware that San Antonio is an entry point for defense, cybersecurity, and those topics. And that's something I'm bringing home to make them aware. Thank you.
The red line through all the operations, what we do at the consulate right now, can be divided in 3 parts: defense, dual use, and resilience. And they are, of course, intertwined, interdependent, heavily interdependent. At the same time, I'm not representing Houston. I'm representing 9 states, and Texas, of course, in the core of everything on those. And when you look at the US today, the US defense sector today, the US economic development today, the 5 fastest growing cities in the US are right now is Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, Austin, and New Orleans. So we try to look through everything what we did. With my colleague Bart from the consulate, we spent 2 days now in Austin at 2 different defense operators, space operators, and probably within a month we are in San Antonio as well. So be prepared. We cannot be that schizophrenic that we are in too many places at the same time, but we do our best. And the next thing is, of course, that I'm opening up 2 new positions in the consulate tomorrow. So keep your eyes open. If you think you are a good match, let us know. We post it on different kind of social media platforms and see where we go so that we can do even more. The other thing what we do now is we concentrate very heavily this spring on space, on the maritime sector, and then on medtech. So anything that you have in those sides, just grab us by the sleeve and see what we can do together.
No, so I think, I mean, so to your point, I'm from Austin, not Houston, so I'm almost local. Yeah. So within Mega Technologies, there's definitely dual use. We see that, and I am working with there's a dog there. I just saw that. No. So we do. I work with a medical device company that is actually considering the dual use and working with the DoD and DoD and DOW, I think it's called now, where it's a different regulatory environment, and often it's actually a bit easier once you get through, because you don't need to have FDA clearance to actually go and apply your technology, which can be an advantage if you think about it. So I thought that's something that you need to think about is that dual use, and is that a path for me to get to the market as well?
Yeah, so I'm hearing that there's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of opportunities to connect with our panelists. Please find them on LinkedIn. Send them a message. I'm not going to give out their personal email addresses because this is currently European territory in this platform, and that is forbidden. So yes, we have to have some compliance here. But thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. Again, please feel free to reach out to them about anything that they've said. Thank you so much for your time.